So I'm an ex-rocket scientist. I had a master's degree in aerospace engineering, but I spent most of my career working in venture capital. And the reason for that is when I graduated, I was thinking like it's hard to make money on space. So I decided to find a place where I could commercialize some technologies and earn money. And the sweet spot was to join the venture capital. And 9 years ago, I joined I2BF Global Ventures. It's a New York venture capital. We've been on the market for the last 15 years, backed more than 100 companies. Typically, we invest at seeds and Series A's, and we have several investment pillars which we stand on. The first one is so-called transforming boring and unsexy industries with a stack of technologies, mostly vertical SaaS solutions, sometimes applying virtual reality, augmented reality, IoT, robotics, all sorts of machine learning and automation. But the idea is to bring efficiency to legacy and outdated industries like construction, manufacturing, logistics, auto repair shops, just to name a few. The other thing we've historically done a lot is DeepTech and moonshot investments. We backed more than 20 companies in renewable space and all sorts of energy, alternative fuels, invested in a few aerospace and robotic companies, and still we, from here and there, we invest in such moonshot projects. Yeah, and the third thing we do is so-called new media, social media, new content delivery platforms, some entertainment solutions. Yeah, so that's more or less a quick overview of what we're doing. Yeah, and besides working at I2BF, I also I have a personal mission of helping out entrepreneurs, mostly around fundraising, associated stuff, or like how to become foundable in from few months to few years. The reason for that is that I've met a lot of startups, especially early startups, which don't really understand sometimes what the VCs would like to see. So I wanted to bring a bit of transparency in this in this world. Yeah, and also I'll talk a little bit later about it. But I have a pet project called Space Ambition, where we help out SpaceTech entrepreneurs and investors. Yeah, so that's a quick overview about myself.
Awesome, man. You got your fingers in a lot of pies, right? You're covering a lot of ground there. I love it. So you're a mentor to these startup founders as well. Are you an ex-founder?
I have experience of co-founding a startup. It was like maybe 10 years ago. It wasn't a successful startup, actually. So we were young and we were young.
You're in good company there, yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I'm a mentor to all to all aspects of running a startups. I'm more on the fundraising side and the side how to pitch to investors, because I naturally understand it better. And when it comes to questions related to business development, I typically tend to prefer to refer people to more experienced in business development and sales and product management, helping people to get better advice than I could do.
This is one of the biggest problems, right? I mean, you hear about and you see deep tech founders all the time kind of come to you with this crazy idea, or they have a fantastic science-heavy concept, but they don't know how to sell, or they've never, worked in a commercial role before. They don't know how to either commercialize it or even present it in a way that most investors can understand. Like I always use the example, there are people that I work with in AI before the generative AI craze, who would try and explain their concept and be like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to send to investors. And it would be like a 50-page, 80-page even deck of all of the intricacies and all of the details, right? And investors want just a short form paragraph, something that's quick and easy and digestible to understand so they can get an overview before digging in deep. So I think that's a really valuable service you're offering there. I wanted to talk on your firm's investment thesis again, actually, because I saw one of the things on your website say basically you marry the digital and the physical worlds together, so kind of bits and atoms. Can you describe what kind of industries that would be most relevant in and what the trends are?
As I said, we typically focus on traditional legacy and outdated industries. It could be manufacturing, it could be logistics, it could be I don't know, just any industry, because many of them are lagging behind. What we go after is we look how you can bring efficiency there. So sometimes you can apply computer vision or big language models, and to bring to bring efficiency. For example, we invested in a company, I don't remember the name. They just a note-taking solution, but for courts. So you just use speech-to-text solution and integrate it with a workflow and save some time and money on doing it manually.
So this is the legal space application, is it? For
this is the legal space. Yeah. But the beauty is when you go after when you do this vertical solutions, despite the industries are very diverse, the mindset of the clients and the typical problems they face actually is the same, but or very very adjacent.
Yeah, and then I remember last time we spoke as well, you kind of implied that SaaS is becoming commoditized. I think a lot of people kind of hold this view now. The kind of bubble that had started after financial crisis and gone on for about a decade, really. You start to see the same kind of copy-paste SaaS products over and over again. There's just kind of like a different front-end UI on top of the same infrastructure, essentially. Do you still hold that view that in a few years, particularly with the advent of AI, that kind of SaaS will become commoditized and it's not really the place that investors should be focusing?
Yeah, I believe so. I started working in venture capital when there was a big hype around mobile applications. And I even had experience to developing apps myself. And now, it's just the interface. No one invests in mobile apps. People typically invest in business models which apply mobile apps, for example, as interfaces. And the same is with AI will be also there. Now what I'm talking is about B2B SaaS. So you can use like Bubble or other no-code or low-code tools to start a typical solution. So it's becoming cheaper and faster to start an MVP and get the first sales. And it becomes more and more commoditized. And if you look at the information available on the market, there is a SaaS stock, there are many services where you can go and get like step-by-step guidance. It doesn't mean that it will work, but it means that there are so many best practices which industry developed during the last 10 years, which you could apply. So, and given that the development becoming more and more commoditized, and actually one of the third aspect is that it's getting easier to invest in B2B SaaS, like making decisions, especially if you're investing at seeds or Series A's. You look at like the month-over-month growth, LTV/CAC ratios, and other. So it means that many VCs can do that. And as with any product, like VC venture capital investments, it's just a service. It's just a product of acquiring shares in the companies. And the economics works the same both for VCs and for startups and for ordinary businesses. So if the barrier to entry is low, then like the margin is leaving the sector. And
that's an excellent point.
Yeah, and actually, this is just economics. Like if you look at microeconomics, look at the books. This is proved mathematically, and this is actually why if you talk to VC, they typically ask you what is the barrier to entry. How are you different from other solutions on the market? What is your secret sauce? It's all about this barrier to entry. And this is something which could drive you to drive the profits for your business and the profits for investors if they purchase a share there.
So can you give us examples then of what the barriers to entries might be, right? I imagine kind of having your own proprietary data set, which kind of forms a data moat, would be one. That would mean that other competitors couldn't just come in and basically take your product.
Yeah, data sets and trained data models, that could be a quite significant barrier to entry. But like the solutions like BERT, these big models like BERT and others, which you could easily train, they do some commoditization here as well. The other barrier to entry could be like some unique partnerships. For example, one of our company, McKinney, they are building an API business for various industrial applications, and you just need to make an integration with many hardware providers, and you need to have them, like hundreds of them. So if you do like 2 or 3 integrations, that wouldn't be a significant barrier to entry. But if you do 100, that's something. It's not easily and fast to replicate, and the network effect starts to apply. And of course, a big barrier to entry is if you can't easily replicate the solution. And this is why one of the reasons I believe that the future of venture capital is in the space of DeepTech. Just because it's hard to replicate, so that there is a barrier to entry, and it's hard to make decisions on those deals if you're a VC. So it naturally means that fewer VCs could go after this sector. And there is another trend, given the current international, policy developments, this technology security for the countries. Each big country would like to have own proprietary solutions. For example, if you look at quantum computing, Germany is doing their quantum computing, France is their quantum computing, UK is doing their quantum computing, US is doing their quantum computing. It's the same as with China. So it means that on one hand, there is a strong market driver for such solutions, and it will be, I believe, for the next decade or two. And on the other hand, there is in each country there is a separate market. Maybe the deals in the sector would be smaller, but more startups in each country would exist.
And
just because of those drivers.
Absolutely. You're seeing so many kind of smaller funds set up that are purely focused on deep tech at the moment. And then when I went to like a software exhibition early this week, actually, a lot of people, as soon as you say the word hardware, they're like, hardware is hard. And they kind of, you can see they draw a blank.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what's the difference then? Like, what can investors do to kind of understand hardware a bit better and open the doors up? Because at the moment it's like, oh, I'm software only, I don't look at hard tech, and they're obviously going to lose out. They're going to lose out in this next wave of investing, right, over the next 5 to 10 years, as software becomes a little bit more commoditized and people will start turning to deep tech.
Okay, so what's already happening? On one hand, for example, in Europe, there are so many institutional LPs, like mostly government-backed. So if you're raising money for a new fund and your investment thesis is B2B software, you already are it's already harder for you to raise money. So governments are already pushing fund managers towards something they need. Okay, so this is one driver. The other driver would be that people will just start losing their money and start gradually understanding that it's hard to do this business. So you can't provide the returns. It wouldn't happen overnight. It will take time, but we will be moving in this direction. And speaking of, and of course, like yes, hardware is hard. And have you ever heard about heuristics?
Heuristics?
Heuristics, yeah.
Yeah, please explain.
Yeah, so typically heuristics help people to make a decision fast. And when the VC says like we don't invest in marketing tech, or we don't invest in drones, or we don't invest in hardware, it's just a heuristic. So for the long time, it was a market sentiment that it's not easy to invest in this sector. So we see look at those like 1, 2, 3, 5 parameters. They typically do a quick screen on the startups, just to like assign them to one of the buckets. But heuristics change. So typically you revisit them every couple of years, and like investing in semiconductor industry, for example, semiconductor startups, was a crazy idea like before COVID, to be honest. Like only Intel, ARM, and others are doing something amazing in this in this space. It was the basic heuristics VCs used a few years ago.
And in that example, you're basically saying you look at semiconductors and it's a hard no. They won't look any further because it's already an industry that you won't even touch.
Yeah. And it happens all the time. You look at the drone industry, for example. Like when I started working in VC 9 years ago, there was a hype around drone and 3D printing. Then for like maybe 8 years, almost nothing was happening in the space. And now there is new interest, especially in developed countries, coming to the sector just to displace Chinese providers, Chinese vendors, at least for the local consumption. So this is the change in heuristic, and it happens all the time. So
that's a really interesting point, because typically you think it's like a technological advance, maybe in an adjacent area that would have allowed certain technologies to take off. But you're saying in the drone example, it was actually the threat of the Chinese being able to flood the market with their drones that spurred the West into action. Is that the case?
Yeah. So and we will see more things like that. Mm-hmm. Before the call with you, I had a call with a US startup doing robots in the United States.
What kind of robotics? What application?
Industrial application for consumer packaged goods.
Okay.
And many manufacturing are like moving away from China to other countries, or moving back to the United States or Europe. And the applying robots is just makes it more cost efficient. And this is one of the drivers for most of the automation.
You're seeing it in Europe with the batteries as well, in terms of trying to set up plants. Okay, some have failed, but there's renewed interest in trying to set up like lithium refining plants, for example, just because China has such a stranglehold on the supply, right? And we have all of this regulation coming into place of, the EU has to produce, in the case of EVs, up to 45% or 60%, even in the next 10 years, all in-house. So just kind of trying to reduce those supply chain dependencies, which maybe ties into the bigger geopolitical picture between the West and China, so to speak.
And this is only one of the drivers. There are other drivers like upcoming energy transition in general, where we need to rebuild many supply chains. You know, when I was like in 2018 at one of the events in Europe, and I was talking to startups, there wasn't such hype around ESG topic, to be honest. And people were talking. Some of the entrepreneurs in the sector were saying, like, the tides are changing. You will see it. And this is also the change heuristic. So it happens all the time, and the drivers could be different. And this is actually one of the reasons VCs typically ask startups. So why is now the right moment for your startup? What has changed in the market? Because you look typically at some technologies and you understand that it could be done like 5 years from now or 5 years ago, and why it's happening right now. And there is not only the technological barriers or like cost of production changed, but there are some business environment changed. And you just need to figure it out. And of course, it will, like, when we started talking about this topic, speaking of VCs, which are like talking about hardware is hardware, not looking at hardware. And of course, as with any idea, like it will like only first of all, we will see like 5 to 10% of early adopters. So the most clever VCs, or like maybe they randomly stumble upon something, start to look at something, how to diversify their portfolio. Then we will see the first successes, and this driver of like harder to raise money for traditional B2B software, for example. And we will see this next 15% of like early adopters, right? Then we will see early majority, and voila, 5 or 10 years from now, we will see like many VCs doing like more softisticated stuff.
The big name VCs will start to come in as well, yeah.
Big name VCs are already doing this. Like, look at Andreessen Horowitz. They even have a podcast, Buyer Eats the World. They are betting on blockchain and Web3. It's a pretty sophisticated technology, and it's also not that easy to make decisions, especially when it comes to protocols and other sophisticated stuff. So they already
in terms of hardware, are the big ones doing it? If we speak strictly hardware and not software, because I know there are a lot of smaller shops. Yeah, you made the point that kind of early adopters might start to dip their toe in the hardware space alongside software. But I know there are a number of smaller VCs, I'm talking 5 to 10 people in total, who are just specifically investing only in hardware. Maybe they have a vertical like hydrogen, energy, batteries, whatever it may be, space even. Are there any big name VCs, blue chip VCs now who are starting to look into hardware as well as the software?
So what I know is I2BF Ventures, one of the biggest investors in SpaceTech. Like they've done quite a few deals. If we talk about quantum computing, there is a French fund. Just trying to remember. No, don't remember the name. There's a cool guy.
Are they quite big? How big's the fund?
So I don't know what's their current AUM, but when I talked to them a couple of years ago, they had $30 million under management, and before that they've done like 15 deals. He did Quantum Nation, if I'm not mistaken. Might be mistaken. Don't remember the name. So he first of all, the guy has a master or PhD in quantum mechanics, So he just can't understand what those eggheads are talking about. And then he did 15 deals or something as a business angel. And then he set up the fund and actually became, I believe, one of the the top 20%, top 10% of the people on the market who understands it well. Yeah, there are some. I haven't done my research, but there are quite a few VCs which are specifically focused on deep tech. There is, for example, I2BF Capital in London. They're specifically focused on deep tech.
Yeah, I mean, the interest is rising as well, and the interest of space, obviously, as well, which is why I'd love to talk about space ambition and kind of. I can see you have the Mandalorian show on there as well, and you've alluded to the fact that, you know, you've been interested in space pretty much your whole life, right? So tell me about that kind of journey and why you decided to get on board with Space Ambition and what you guys actually do. I understand you kind of throw events, you have a newsletter. Tell us all about it.
Yeah. So first about my story. I remember I've loved space as long as I remember myself. So maybe it started in 5 years or 6 years. The first moment was when I watched cartoons about Transformers, those fancy robots flying in space, and like back then there was a perception like travel from one planet to another is just as easy as take a bus from one town to another. And then I grew up and I understood that it's not the case, and I became pretty upset. But I have always loved science fiction and dreaming of something like moving to the stars. And then I had a bachelor degree and master degree in aerospace engineering. But for various reasons, I decided not to pursue. The main reason was that back then I graduated in 2009. It was even before the era of new space. So Elon Musk wasn't Elon Musk as we know it now. And it meant that you could either work in big corporations, government corporations doing this stuff, or there actually were not that much of an option for you. So I decided to go to VC where the idea was I could commercialize on the technologies and help clever people to earn money with their brains. Despite and actually the reason I joined I2BF was their investment in 2013 in a company, Planetary Resources. It was the first company to mine asteroids. So it was mind-blowing for me. I was 26 years old back then. And I was working in a bank. And here I talked to guys who invest together with Richard Branson and Larry Page to companies who are fulfilling my childhood dreams. So this is actually one of the reasons I joined I2BF 9 years ago. And most of my career, I was focused more on more easiest business models rather than SpaceTech. But a few years ago, during pandemics, I started to ask myself. So pandemics actually was a big stress to people, and as well as for me. And I started to ask myself. So if I love, if I'm so crazy about space, so probably I should do something about it. And I typically do small steps. So I did a webinar. I always have interns who help me out to gather some information. So I had one aerospace engineer as an intern, and I asked him to make an overview of SpaceTech sectors, niches, and we just did a webinar. Then I hosted another webinar with a SpaceTech entrepreneur, and the guy was actually a career shifter. He had no idea about aerospace before. He was just a business developer. So I got curious what's happening. Then I came across a problem that if you look at the space rocket engines, they all use jet propulsion in one form or another. And then I understood, like, if you watch Mandalorian, they use pretty different principles for space flights, and this will be the case 100, 200 years, like in 200 years. This is how we'll be traveling between the planets. But jet propulsion is no answer to that. So I decided to look into physics. So what's happened in physics, and is there, like, I heard that there is a dark matter, string theory when I was a student. So what's happening in the field? And I understand that actually not much happened. So there is a warp drive, like mysterious theoretical engine, but that's it. So, since I graduated from a very good university, I have a lot of my alums who pursued career in physics or in science. So I just started to talk to them, getting more insights about the problems physicists face and DeepTech faces, and I decided to do something about it. And this is how we started Space Ambition 8 months ago. So we started as a blog. Just we decided, we gathered a team. We actually now have a team of 20 people. Most of them are volunteering, helping us. Some of them are doing research. Some of them are writing articles. Some of them are helping out us, talking with startups. So we started from the idea that we will educate people on niche topics of aerospace. And we wanted to show that space is not only about Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson. There are much more entrepreneurs going after it. And in London, in the United Kingdom, there is quite a big sector of cluster of aerospace startups. You guys are a bit crazy about it. I don't know how it happened. So the first thing we do in Space Ambition is just educate people, covering niche topics on various space sectors. For example, today we talked about, we wrote an article about what is pharma doing on the ISS and in space, and why it's important to run experiments in space. Just because in zero G you have some specific like the matter acts a bit differently, and it helps you to do different stuff.
So the microgravity is a very important property, right? I know last time we talked about kind of the low hanging fruit, so to speak, of space technology and the moonshots. So the low hanging fruit would be things like kind of orbital debris and Earth observation and stuff like that. Can you talk more about the moonshot? Go ahead. Yeah.
Actually, there are even lower hanging fruits, and even VCs which have B2B SaaS or marketplace investment thesis can go after it. For example, you can build applications using satellite imaging or using IoT, a mix of them. For example, I have a friend, he's building a startup, Carbon Space. So what they do is they utilize third-party providers' data on carbon footprint, and just build an analytic system on top of that and integrate it so that big corporates, mostly in agriculture, could get insights and make meaningful decisions on that, business decisions. And actually, Earth observation has become pretty interesting for corporates lately. Do you remember this event in Suez Channel when the tanker blocked it, right?
Of course, yeah.
So these are events like that you can see from satellite images, and the traders started to use them more oftenly the last couple of years. And there was, I don't remember the name of the company, but there was a big acquisition for $1 billion or something of a company in the United States which was focused on Earth observation. And there are so much things which could be done using analytics, machine learning, and mixing it with some other source of informations and integrating them in some stacks. So what I'm saying is there is even a lower hanging fruit, and you can just
quite I imagine the VCs will take to that as well, because most of it is primarily a software model that they're used to. They can probably see it scaling quite easily, and without having that huge risk of sending a payload up into space.
They just can be introduced to the sector through such business models, and exactly. Then gradually they can expand, because dealing with space debris and building satellites. It's already it's not a commodity, but it could be done. It's not like such a big moonshot, but still it's the next level of startups in aerospace, because there is a lot of hardware and there is a lot of specifics of launching it and operating it in orbit. It's a little bit harder to understand. And then there are, of course, moonshots.
One I've seen that's really interesting is kind of creating new materials, right? So I was at an event the other day where Space Forge had kind of a presentation, and they were talking about how semiconductor crystals could be made much more fine in the zero gravity. He showed me kind of a prototype of something that's typically used in an aircraft at the moment with their semiconductor, with a huge kind of heat sink behind it. And he said, this is the heat sink required for a semiconductor made using the crystals up in space. And it was basically something this big compared to something that would fit in the palm of your hand, right? So you can immediately see there was probably a 10x or even a 50x reduction in weight just by doing something in space. He also referenced kind of work that NASA had done into research into lithium replacement alloys that could be made up due to kind of the zero gravity. Are those the kind of applications that you've seen that are more moonshot in the space sector?
Yeah. Actually, we're actually putting a list of such cases. For example, you can producing lenses is better in zero G, just because of the shapes getting better. But these are still the experiments. But one idea I want you to remember today is that if you do something for space, but you could apply it widely on Earth, that's one of the best startups you can build. And we even have put together an article maybe 5 or 6 months ago, when we looked at the technologies which were developed during the lunar program and ISS missions, and which are applied on Earth. For example, the baby formula, the food for kids, it was initially developed for astronauts. And there is orthopedic mattresses. Also, there is almost 10% of the market use the technology which was initially developed for astronauts, as well as sneakers, with their bubbles inside. Were developed for lunar programs. So
it's a bit like the military, right? It's like when the conditions are harsh and extreme, and your environment is demanding innovation, then you often stumble across the best applications that can also be used for civilians.
It shouldn't be military. It should deal with some extreme. It's extreme environment.
I'm drawing a parallel between the military and, because I'm speaking to people who started military companies. So, for example, drone technology, it just advancing at a crazy rate. And they were talking about how kind of a lot of the innovation starts in the military and kind of seeps back into the civilians after a few years. Something similar is happening in space.
Initially, of course, all the space era started around military and government funding, right? But to be honest, any deep tech industry at some point needs some support, maybe government guaranteeing or some stimulation. And you see how China is doing this. Europe is doing this. For example, like one of the spectacular examples is the development of quantum computing space, where like UK, Germany, France are making big grants and government support programs for the sector. So what I'm saying is, of course, developing technologies starts it could start not from the main market where it would be widely applied. And if we talk about SpaceTech, one of the things you can do is look into the NASA and ESA programs and governments and like co-investment programs. So what are they betting on? And we actually did a review of them like several months ago. You can check it out on our blog. And this could give you an idea of what you could work on.
For the listeners, what were the takeaways of your study? Were there any kind of key themes that stood out to you that people should work on?
One of the biggest topic for NASA is, of course, this Artemis program. And there are so many things. There are many experiments, and we actually the first article of Space Ambition was about what's happening on the moon, and there is a moon accelerator, and there are around 90 startups or something doing something, and there are very different experiments. For example, some startups are going to grow plants or monitor them. Others are setting up telecommunication, like Wi-Fi or 4G. Others are, bringing in a server. Of course, it's just like it's not the application where you will make billions of dollars, but you can get some funding, you can get some traction, and you can learn. And at the same moment, you can think about how I could apply the same or similar technology for some wider application. For example, I don't know, use this for some hazard environments, like I don't know, in the distant regions.
And an interesting kind of flip side of that is space solar. So obviously there's a small number of people that think, it would be great if we could put up solar panels into space and then use microwaves to beam it down to Earth. Is that something that you've looked into and you're interested in at all? Because that's like the flip side of what you said. It's almost like taking technology that's been proven out on Earth and trying to put it in space, a new environment. So
first of all, so far as I know, solar panels were initially developed for satellites. So one of the first applications, just because you couldn't get energy in space otherwise, and the projects you're talking about, yes, we even looked into. We wrote an article about them. These projects are hard, but as far as I remember, some either Japanese company or Japanese government already experimenting with that, but it's not. It's not what's.
They're experimenting, I think. Yeah, NASA. Yeah, the Japanese. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are the projects which drive my curiosity, of course, but I believe they like a little bit far off.
But I think what's interesting in particular, you make an excellent point, but it does come back to, when the boundaries of innovation are pushed, then we maybe stumble across something that could be used on Earth. I think for me personally, the most interesting piece of that is the kind of wireless technology used to transfer the energy. Of course, we already have like kind of touch charges and this kind of stuff. I think, in a lab, it's been proven that we can charge things from about a few meters away with minimal loss. And then obviously the next step would be, how the hell do you get something that's tens or hundreds of kilometers up to actually beam down to Earth and capture that energy? if we were to make progress in that regard, do you see that as an exciting technology? If you think about kind of energy on Earth, being able to beam it from, a decentralized solar plant, for example, out to a remote area, tens or hundreds of kilometers away, as opposed to having to build all of this expensive infrastructure, which is, typically cited as one of the reasons, kind of the drawbacks of renewables.
I believe that in the future we will definitely have such solutions, and I'll add even more. If you look at the energy consumption on Earth, not all of the energy is consumed by end users, like by people, by households. Much of it is consumed by manufacturing, right? And and in the future, there will be many manufacturing plants in space, either on orbit or on the moon. So you don't even need to produce this energy on Earth. You need to produce it in space because you will consume it in space and only bring back to Earth the finished goods, like robots, for example, something small with a huge added value, or even use it in space. Like maybe 20 years from now, there will be a space economy. Like things will be happening on the orbits, and there is also space industry is also around $400 billion in annual revenue, all sorts of it. So it's already pretty big. McKinsey, as far as I remember, or one of the big consulting companies, they forecast that it will reach $1 trillion in 10 years. So it's pretty solid industry already, but in the future it will become even bigger. And many things will be happening in space. You will be producing in space. For example, building a ship traveling to Mars, or like, I don't know, a fleet traveling to Mars. In the future, it will be more reasonable to build it in zero G, just because you have a ship. You don't need tons of fuel to leave the Earth. And it will be already happening there, and you will need energy to supply this production.
It's a bit like James Webb as well, right? They had to kind of recreate the microgravity environment to build the telescope. Endless testing. If you were able to get, with the launch cost going so low, if you're able to just get it up there, build it and test it out there, that's probably a huge amount of cost immediately eradicated just to deploy these things.
And you actually have immense amount of resources in the asteroid belt. So in the future, you'll be taking those resources, processing them, and building stuff in space.
I find that so fascinating, that aspect, like mining asteroids. I think to me that's like the most appealing aspect of space. Solving all of these global supply chains and all this talk, and the thought of actually going out into the cosmos and being able to take materials and to build stuff either back on Earth or out in space is fascinating. Is there a lot of activity in that space? I know you referenced the company that kind of drew you away from the banking lifestyle at the start of your space career, but is there many more startups looking at that at the moment?
We looked into them. It's just like the planetary resources was the first wave of these startups. Sometimes the startups are just far ahead of their time. The next wave of startups in the space, at least so far as I remember, started just recently. So the interest to this asteroid mining started to happen again, like in 2021 or something. I believe that we're still far from mining asteroids, but there are some experiments. For example, NASA crashed a satellite on purpose on one of the asteroids last year or something. It was more for the purpose of crashing asteroids in terms of for potential danger for the Earth, not for the mining efforts, but we gradually are moving in this direction. And one thing to mention, that if you develop this technology, the technology barrier would be so immense, so that it would be hard to replicate easily. So, like Elon Musk with their rockets. So they have the cheapest price for the launch, like, and most lion's share of the clients on the market are using them just because they mastered their solution, made it cheaper, and it's harder for other players to enter this market. And the same will be with mining, asteroid mining. At some point, some companies will build the technology stack, and they become some monopolies. And for certain countries and for certain companies, it will give them like a decade of advantage or something.
So getting in early, cementing your position, and really building that moat of technology. But Denis, you're so into space. Are you not thinking about starting a company of your own? I know you talked about the propulsion systems that you were looking into. Is that still going on in the background? I know you guys had an article on it recently that was very interesting on space ambition. Is that something you're personally keeping an eye on, or are you looking for a different kind of inspiration when it comes to you founding a startup?
A few years ago, I started to work with a business coach, and one thing he helped me to understand is my personal mission. And this personal mission is very simple: help people which could positively contribute to the humanity and the life at the horizon of 50, 100 years. So. I don't know what I will be doing like 10 years from now, but for now I'm more focused on working with startups and helping others build big businesses in this sector. So this is why we started from Space Ambition as a blog and as a consultancy company, not as a startup which we're going after. Maybe in the future, I will change my opinion and start off something myself. But for now, I'm more focused on helping others who struggle with like fundraising, getting to the market, and others. And for now, I'm focused on building this small ecosystem and connecting the dots in this small and a little bit weird world of space investments.
I love it. And then we'll see how it blossoms. I'm sure it will be fantastic in the future. I think there's a real need for it as well, because, we discussed it last time as well about the accelerator landscape, about how it's very kind of software focused, how it's becoming a little bit more of a brand name as opposed to a value add. And it's not like, you're not being predatory in any way. You're not trying to take equity from these people. You're genuinely trying to help them and build an ecosystem. And I really like that. And I want to finish on one point, Denis, which is in our previous conversation when we met. We talked about kind of AI and the job creation that's coming up and how people need to think really carefully about how they position themselves. What advice would you give then to like new founders in the field or young people that are kind of looking at the landscape right now and thinking, it's a lot of uncertainty. I do like the point you just made about kind of understanding what your purpose is. I would say that's a great answer in terms of do something that you can see yourself doing for at least 10 years and that will give you value, and in the hard times you'll persevere. Do you have any other tips in terms of kind of finding where you should focus your efforts?
So first of all, as you said, that like focus on what you love, and then make sure that it will be trendy for the next decade. It will be meaningful and it will be trendy. And there is one of the exercises I do when people come to me and say, I would like to change my career, typically to pursue career in venture capital, or launch a startup, or join some meaningful startup in some field. So I give them a list of 170 niches VCs are investing in, and said like just give them a score from 1 to 10. What do you prefer more? And then we look at those lists and distill it to a few directions. And the other thing I would advise, as soon as like you narrow it down to a few industries you're specifically crazy about, just go and talk to someone who already works in this sector. Maybe visit a conference, find someone who is working for a company doing machine learning or something. Just look at those people, what those people are curious about. Do you like spend time with those people? And if you do, then you can go deeper. And of course, it's really important to expand your network in this in the area of your interest. Like just to find people who are as crazy as you about something. Like, for example, I'm crazy about space, and build this network and acquire knowledge through those people, through conferences, through specific communities, through friends and professionals. And if it's possible, find a mentor. Find a mentor who is maybe several years ahead in the journey than you are. It shouldn't be like a very, very advanced person. Just could be like a senior or middle professional in the area of your interest, and ask him or her. So how did they end up there? What were the problems? How they overcame them? And typically, people look at you and say, "Hey, I was there a few years ago. I want to help you out somehow." Yeah.
Dennis,
so that would be the advices.
That's fantastic. I think that's some of the best advice I've ever heard regarding this topic. I've definitely done that myself. I know the value of networking. There's something really to be said for, I think, particularly when it comes to deep tech, there is almost like this invisible barrier that, perhaps if you didn't have like a really scientific background, you think, how am I ever going to break into this space? But it's as simple as, making a connection on LinkedIn or picking up the phone or attending one of the many, many free conferences that happen.
Or just go to the university. There is a course in UK, be a SO course. So it's be a scientific operator. So the guy and it costs like $50. Like the 2 year training costs like $50. Yeah, and the guy. It's actually a lawyer, and he does this training for people without expertise in deep tech, and he matches them with people from academia, like PhDs who are very like into some topic, and he mixes them up to build teams for deep tech startups. So
that's awesome. I'm going to look into that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I'll send you the link later.
Send me the link and I'll share it, because I'm sure a lot of people will have value out of that. But Denis, thanks so much for your time, man. It's been a real pleasure. Your infectious attitude towards space has definitely rubbed off on me. Really interested now. I've been doing my own research, of course, but it's just such a awesome multi-dimensional space where, if you have a software background, hardware background, everyone can pitch in and really innovate. Just to close, obviously, I want everyone to kind of look at Space Ambition and to follow you. Are there any other particular shout outs you wanted to do?
You mean my call to action to the listeners?
Yeah, your call to action, exactly.
Yeah, I would say so. Sometimes we do some job or do something just because others expect us to do something, like get a good job, well-paid job, and we forget what we were dreaming of when we were kids, and we force us not to dream and not to go after our dreams. So it is my call to action is just follow your heart and try to find what to do, both be successful, well paid, and passionate about what you're doing.
Oh man, can't stop smiling because I relate to that so strongly. And it's fantastic advice to end on. Thanks so much, Denis.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Anytime. Take care. Bye-bye.